The last time anyone saw Tina was as Tina left work at a local hospital.
So was there any suggestion that somebody else was involved in her disappearance?
He was a logical person to go talk to as a potential suspect.
She wouldn't move away someplace and never contact anybody.
There were no witnesses to any sort or confrontation. There was nothing.
Why did investigators feel he was a suspect?
They could see a shovel, a white bucket, and an odd assortment of items in the car. And quite honestly, other than his mother, not a human on the planet liked him.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's crime expose takes us to Greeley, Colorado. The town became the backdrop of a terrifying mystery when a young woman with her whole life ahead of her simply vanished. As investigators tried to find out what happened to Tina Tournai, it became clear it would not be easy. And within months of her disappearance, the case went cold. That is, until the passage of time made it possible to hold her killer accountable. The date was October 20th, and as the sun began to fade in the Colorado sky, a frantic mother turned to police when her daughter suddenly went missing.
Tina Tournai's mother, Mary Tournai, called Greeley police on October 20th, just after 7 in the evening, to report her suspicions that something had happened to her daughter, Tina, who was otherwise missing and couldn't be found by any member of her family.
In talking with Mary Tournai, police learned that her daughter's sudden disappearance was completely out of character.
The last time anyone reportedly saw Tina was about 7 in the morning on October 19th as Tina left work at a local hospital where she was a nurse in the oncology department.
I think nobody expected her disappearance because she was moving on. She had left her husband. She had a great job. She was, starting a whole new life.
Police called the hospital to confirm Tina had completed her shift. Her 8 siblings were also contacted, but no one had seen or heard from Tina.
When police finally got to the point where they decided to start searching because they were worried themselves, they went to look at her apartment and they noticed that her computer was on and it looked like there was nothing amiss other than a woman who had just gotten off work.
There was nothing out of the ordinary to explain Tina's whereabouts, and that made her disappearance all the more unsettling. What did you discover in her apartment?
There was no signs of a struggle, but detectives found her work ID as well as a nurse's smock that she had purchased. So clearly she had come home and apparently changed clothes before disappearing.
Tina's car was not in the parking lot, and investigators began a search for the vehicle, hoping that it would lead them to the missing woman. 7 hours after Tina's family called police, they got a break.
Detective Olson found the car. It was 3 in the morning. It was about 2 blocks to the south of her home and 2 blocks east, parked in an apartment complex where neighbors and people that lived there would tell officers they had never seen it before.
Police found Tina's car in an apartment complex. It was behind a grocery store here in Greeley, and there was really no rhyme or reason why that car would be there.
So it was, essentially 6 to 7 hours after Mary Tournai reported Tina was missing.
But there was no sign of Tina Tournai. So far, there were more questions than answers about her disappearance. What did you find, if anything, in her car?
The keys were missing from the vehicle. Her cellular phone, which in 1995 was not a frequent thing to find people in possession of phones. Tina's wallet was in the vehicle as well.
Police could only speculate as to what happened to Tina Tournai. They had little to go on and no evidence that she was the victim of a crime.
After finding the car, efforts continued to establish with evidence, credible evidence, what happened to Tina.
Tina was a beloved member of our community. She was a nurse. She was very bright. She moved up the ranks really fast. And from what I understand, she was very, very good with patients. She had lots of friends. The only person who would potentially be against her is her ex-husband. And she was missing, but there were no witnesses to an argument of any sort or confrontation.
Police then learned more information about Tina. She was separated from her husband, and Tina had told her family and her coworkers she was meeting with her estranged husband that morning after her shift ended. And what did investigators learn that might explain why Tina was missing?
She spoke with her best friend and sister, Susan, and told her that as part of the divorce that was proceeding between her and her husband, John Sandoval, that Tina needed to collect some money that he owed her. Tina told Susan she wasn't looking forward to the meeting, and they agreed. Tina needed to call Susan no later than noon on the 20th of October, just to let Susan know that Tina finished the meeting and had left John.
She had just one more thing to settle with her husband before she could really wear hands of it. She went to meet her husband, and she was never heard from again.
Police needed to speak with her husband to see if he knew anything about Tina's whereabouts. In the early hours of the investigation, every minute counted.
She was missing. There was no body. There was nothing.
Detectives investigating the disappearance of Tina Tournai were stymied in their search for the young woman. Learning that Tina was planning to meet her estranged husband sent the investigation in a new direction.
That morning when we found the car, Tina's car, such a short distance from Sandoval's house, an officer established surveillance.
Police went to John Sandoval's home to find out what he knew, if anything. So what did detectives see when they arrived?
They inspected Sandoval's car and could see a shovel with water droplets that were beginning to freeze on the blade. They saw a white bucket, a flashlight with a string tied to it, a trash bag, things like that. And about 2 hours and 45 minutes after the car was found, Sandoval pulled up outside of his home, exited, and hustled into the home.
At that moment, detectives decided to take Tina's estranged husband into custody.
Police went to speak with John. His aunt was there, and at first she denied that he was there and said he was in the shower, he wasn't available, and they had kind of surrounded the house by then.
And what was his reaction to police showing up at his home?
Knowing the evidence that they saw inside of the car, Detective Goldschmidt opted to enter the home, and Goldschmidt noticed plumes of steam from hot water billowing out of the bathroom. When Goldschmidt got to the door, he could hear shuffling sounds inside. When he forced open the bedroom door, he discovered Sandoval had jumped from a window and exited the home. Sandoval was confronted by law enforcement standing outside the home. He squared off to fight. He quickly lost that fight. He was taken into custody and brought to the police department.
Police questioned Sandoval about the whereabouts of his wife, and he acted like a man with something to hide. So how was John with investigators? What was his demeanor like?
When police were questioning John, he really was pretty defiant. He basically threw it back in their face. Why would I know anything about her disappearance or where she is right now? They noticed scratch marks on his neck, and they had to hold him down so they could take pictures. John started chewing his nails. The police did not want to lose any potential evidence, so they handcuffed him, and he fought them with every fiber of his being.
While John Sandoval was being interrogated, a police dog was brought in to identify the scent of whoever last drove Tina's vehicle.
And that dog, Daisy, would track the last person in the vehicle from the car down the street and up to the front door of Sandoval's home, and sniffed at that front door and confirmed that the person she was tracking went there.
While Sandoval was held on a previous breaking and entering charge, police learned that there was another man in Tina's life, and they had to consider the possibility that a jealous lover could have turned on Tina. So with another man now in the picture, was there suspicion that he could be involved in her disappearance?
That was always a possibility. She had a romantic relationship with John Sandoval's cousin, Jesse Martinez. He was interviewed early on, was vetted and researched. At least he was a logical person to go talk to and either establish an alibi or otherwise discount him as a potential suspect.
Weeks turned into months, and Tina's family began to doubt that they would ever see her again.
Well, the investigation from that point on really kind of suffered from a bit of stagnation. There was tons and tons of tips coming in on the tip line, so much so people were calling in on psychics from across the country were calling in with false leads. It was really years and years of false leads that led them nowhere. There was no body. There was just not enough to arrest somebody for murder, and they just didn't have it yet. And without a body, they just didn't have what the DA at the time thought was enough to charge John with murder.
He threatened to stab her to death, along the lines of, "I can't have you, nobody will."
Within months of Tina Tournai's disappearance, the investigation into who was responsible lost steam. Without a body or evidence of murder, the case was unable to move forward. But investigators continued to look into Tina and John's marriage and learned it was not a happy union.
Tina moved out and had filed for divorce almost 3 weeks before her disappearance, and he was claiming that if he couldn't have her, no one would.
John had regular contact with the Greeley police off and on for several years, starting when he was around 17 years old. He fancied himself as a kind of a night crawler, cat burglar type. He called himself the Shadow. He had a reputation for peeking in windows of women. He was accused of staging a robbery at a liquor store that he worked at so he could get away with the money. And whenever he was caught, he found a way to get out of it.
Police discovered other disturbing details about John Sandoval. He was not a man who took rejection well. What did you learn that could have led to Tina leaving your husband?
Well, I'd located at least 4 previous stalker-type behavior involving Sandoval and women that he had had intimate relationships with, where he threatened to take one of them into the county and stab her to death.
One of his girlfriends actually fled the state in fear of him because he broke into her apartment and took her by knife point and threatened to cut her into little pieces and leave her body in the mountains. And she disappeared because she was afraid. But then they also found another victim of John's who he stalked for years.
According to Tina's sister, Tina was dreading the meeting with her husband to finalize their divorce. Tina even shared a prophetic warning of what could happen. So how concerned was Tina about meeting with this man who was obsessed with her?
If anything happens to me, it's because of John. Those were her words exactly.
Although police didn't have enough evidence to connect John Sandoval to his wife's disappearance, they did charge him with breaking into another woman's apartment months before Tina went missing.
And I think the police at the time thought that would give them some time to really, dive a little more, maybe wait it out, find her body, and just continue.
John pled guilty to that crime and served 8 years on the stalking charge. Upon release, he moved to Las Vegas and tried to escape his past. But 14 years later, a new prosecutor was convinced that the passage of time proved that Tina was no longer alive. John Sandoval was finally arrested for the murder of Tina Tournai. Without a body, how could prosecutors prove that Tina was dead?
The approach that we took was to begin to examine every record source within the United States. So we're talking Social Security, the National Crime Information Computer, nursing licenses, driver's license repositories, social media, and ultimately we found no existence of Tina after October 20th.
Tina's entire family was there every single day for every moment of that trial, and it was tense. There was fear. I talked to jurors who were afraid to look at him because he was so scary to even them. The most compelling thing for me in that 30-day trial was listening to the women who he stalked, who he victimized for a long time, especially his first girlfriend, who he threatened to cut up into little pieces. You could feel her terror.
The prosecutor succeeded in proving that Tina wasn't alive and that her husband was responsible for her death. John Sandoval was convicted for the first-degree murder of his wife, Tina Tournai. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. So what did it mean to Tina's family to finally see the conviction?
The family, they just wanted justice. They wanted John to go down for what he did, and that's what we received with that verdict.
But the justice Tina's family so desperately wanted didn't last. In 2016, John Sandoval's conviction was overturned on a technicality.
His defense attorney was authorized to negotiate a plea in exchange for Tina's body.
1 year after the Colorado Court of Appeals overturned John Sandoval's murder conviction, Weld County moved to retry the case. The prosecutor requested all recorded phone calls by Sandoval while in custody. So what was the reaction to the request for Sandoval's phone records?
And within a few short hours, his defense attorney was authorized by Sandoval to negotiate a plea in exchange for Tina's body.
The Tournai family agreed to the deal, and John Sandoval was sentenced to 25 years to life. And Tina Tournai's body was finally found in a cemetery of all places, the Sunset Memorial Gardens in Greeley, beneath a casket which was buried on the same day that Tina Tournai went missing. And even though a killer was convicted in her death, like the family of so many victims, the Tournai family had to endure the pain of not having their loved one home. And police say they had to make a deal with the devil just to get Tina's body. And now it's time for our safety spotlight. Tina Tournai Sandoval's story is a sobering reminder of the importance of taking threats and concerns seriously, especially when dealing with potentially dangerous situations involving an ex-partner. Here are some safety tips based on her case. When dealing with a strained or potentially dangerous relationship, handle all communications through lawyers whenever possible. This minimizes direct contact and reduces the risk of confrontation. For your safety, never agree to meet an ex-partner alone if there are concerns about their behavior. Always involve a third party or arrange to meet in a secure, monitored environment. If an ex-partner has a history of violence or makes explicit threats, treat these warnings with the utmost seriousness. Contact law enforcement and document any threats or aggressive behavior. And if you have a gut feeling that something is wrong, don't ignore it. Take proactive measures to protect yourself. I'm Nancy O'Dell. For all of us here at Crime Exposé, please join us next time and stay safe.